It's 6:30, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. Before we do the pledge, are there any parents of these incredible performers here? If there are, stand up so we can acknowledge you. Thank you so much. So would everyone please rise and the ensemble will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can we have another round of applause for these amazing performers? Thank you so much. Can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Pantera,
Here.
Mrs. Case,
Here.
Mrs. Greenberg,
Here.
Mrs. Baker,
Here.
Mrs. Christensen.
Here.
So next on the agenda is approval of agenda. Dr. Reynolds.
Thank you, President Greenberg, Governing Board, Cabinet, and all of our guests. Again, great job. That was amazing. Items approved by consent will not come up for discussion during the meeting, but will be approved when the agenda is adopted. This is possible since members of the Governing Board receive the agenda along with backup materials at least 24 hours prior to the meeting and have had time to review and consider all items. Prior to the agenda being adopted, members of the Governing Board may ask that an item be removed from the consent agenda and brought to the floor for discussion at the appropriate place on the agenda. Any member of the audience who submitted a blue public comment card prior to the start of the meeting will be recognized to speak on that agenda item under items for approval. I would like to offer tonight's agenda as posted.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. We received no blue public comment cards, so it does not look like any member of the audience wants to move anything from consent. Does any member of the Governing Board wish to have an item removed from the consent agenda? Nope. Seeing none, Mrs. Baker, may I have a motion to approve the meeting agenda and recommended consent agenda items?
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Are there any abstentions? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is Governing Board statements. Mrs. Baker, do you have?
Thank you, President Greenberg. That was an incredible performance. I cannot wait to go see that show. Those kids blew me away. Welcome, everyone. I hope everyone had a restful or fun or adventurous fall break, whatever you needed, and that you're settling back into the routine of school. Just real quick, I want to take a minute to acknowledge World Mental Health Day, which is today, and Mental Illness Awareness Week, which is this week, and that also goes hand in hand with Bullying Prevention Month. So observing these, they're not really holidays, recognizing these days remind us all that we need to foster a supportive environment where mental health is prioritized, bullying is actively prevented, and the stigma around mental health is broken. And I think that's the conversations we need to be having with our children is breaking that stigma that is tied to mental health. Our children are so inundated with social media. Right now, there's so many attack ads, just a flood of information that they can't always filter through their growing brains. And so it's important we recognize the issues our kids are facing, and we need to be a safe space for them to talk about issues around their own mental health. And I just wanted to bring awareness to that. So have a fantastic October, and thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Baker. Mrs. Christensen? I will get back to you. Mr. Pantera, do you have anything?
Yes, hello, everyone. Glad you're all here. I, too, am looking forward. I've already got my tickets to the Broadway Under the Stars. I saw it last year. It was great. I know it's going to be great this year, too. We had a meeting, the PV Voice, where students met and talked to administrators and board members and talked about what's on their mind. And the topic was AI. So I said, I'm going to try this AI thing. I never used Chat GP or T, whatever it's called. So I thought I'll give it a shot. Here it is. Pardon the glasses. I said I wanted an opening remarks. And this is what it gave me. Hello, everyone. I wanted to share some thoughts from the PV Voice meeting I attended on September 24th. It was inspiring to see so many students come together to discuss a topic that's on everyone's minds, artificial intelligence. The enthusiasm in the room was palpable as students expressed their desire to use AI in a safe and ethical manner. It's clear that they understand the potential of this technology, but they also recognize the importance of using it responsibly. We talked about everything from ensuring privacy to promoting inclusivity, which really highlighted their commitment to making a positive impact. I believe this conversation is vital as we move forward. It's encouraging to see the next generation prioritizing ethics in technology, and I'm excited to see how they will lead the way in creating guidelines that reflect their values. Let's continue to support and engage with these discussions, fostering an environment where innovation and ethics go hand in hand. And it sounds just like me, doesn't it? It's amazing, totally amazing. Wow, they totally nailed me. And we're looking forward to the next conversation. They're going to bring recommendations to us about how they think they want to use and how AI should be used in the ways that we discussed here. It's really great, and I'm very excited about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pantera. Mrs. Case?
That was very instructive to hear that. I wanted to mention a couple things. First of all, Horizon's performers were amazing. It's one of my favorite things being on the board is going to these productions. I went to them before I was on the board, and I've always made a point of going, and I really look forward to that. And these students are so amazing. In looking through the board materials, there are 4 different things that are on the consent agenda tonight that had to do with air conditioning, chiller, I don't know all the technical stuff, but it keeps us cool, okay? And then there were 2 on there for weatherization. And I just want to thank the public for their continued support so we can do these things. And, you know, we've been watching the news in North Carolina and Florida and all their horrific weather challenges they've had. And I mean, kids have, you know, closed down the schools, they closed down everything in those places, and other places got washed away. At one point, they couldn't find 23 teachers in North Carolina. And all those students don't have school to go to. And I heard a teacher talking about what those kids were missing. And so if you think about the weather things that happen on the East Coast, I think it's cheaper what we do to keep our buildings cool so that we can continue in education. But with this horrible heat we've been having in Arizona, unusually so, I just think how grateful I am that we've had the foresight to take care of these chillers so that we can continue our education. It's our way of being wise and making sure that our teachers and students can be comfortable as they're educated. So I just want to thank the public again for supporting the bonds that take care of these very important weather conditions that we have in Arizona. We have heat. We don't have tornadoes. We don't have hurricanes. Those come with all kinds of costs we don't deal with, but we do have heat, and we need that air conditioning always in top notch. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Case. Mrs. Christensen?
Thank you, President Greenberg, for giving me a moment. I did not know that performance would affect me so much. For those of you that don't know, my son just graduated from Horizon High School, and he's at a performing arts school in Boston, and it just overwhelmed me. This is the first time I'm going to see Broadway Under the Stars without my son being in it. So it was bittersweet, but I just was a bit overwhelmed. So good job, Horizon, and their amazing choir. I do want to welcome everybody here today, and it is, like it or not, officially election season. I voted this week, and I just wanted to wish all our great governing board candidates that are running good luck in this election. We have 6 fantastic people that really care about this district, and so I just want to wish them all well. And I appreciate that Mrs. Excuse me, Mrs. Baker talked about bullying prevention. One of the reasons I started getting so involved here is because when we moved to this district from Avondale, my son was getting bullied, and I was in a job that I loved. I was kind of retired from information technology. I was in veterinary medicine, and he started getting bullied. And I quit my job to go back to volunteer in the schools to help him and to come alongside him. And he's grown into this wonderful PV Schools graduate. And, we all have different journeys. The students have different journeys and the parents. So I'm just so happy with how things have turned out with him. And I just want to thank everybody today. And we all have very different ideas of how to make PV Schools better, but I can tell you all 5 of us up here, we love PV Schools, and so do all the people that are running. And it is kind of sad to be seeing some of the disparaging remarks. I mean, one of the funny ones about me was that I'm back to dog walking. Well, that's kind of true. I have 2 big dogs, so I'm walking them every day. But one of the reasons I was when I retired is because my son was kind of shy, and with that bullying, I took a dog walking job after I retired from veterinary medicine. I was managing a large veterinary hospital, and we walked dogs together, and it was a beautiful time for us. And so there's no job too small, and so I taught him good ethics and the entrepreneurial spirit of just dog walking, and that was something my son and I can do together. So thank you all for listening. I'm sorry, I don't normally go on and on. I'm just a bit emotional today. I think it was the choir. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mrs. Christensen. And yes, we've all been there with our kids in some way, shape, or form, so we totally understand. I also want to welcome everybody here for our single October regular meeting. And Mr. Pantera, I just want to say, I think ChatGPT actually did a great job, if not capturing your voice necessarily, of hitting many of the points we actually did.
Well, that's
Come
that's
up
that's the
with.
most important thing, getting the message across one way
Yeah.
or another. Yes.
Yeah, and I do want to say that I going back to student voice, it's it's something we've done in this district now about what, 8 years, 10 years, where we meet regularly with groups of high school students, freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors, from each high school. And after the law conference, where many of the speakers, and particularly 2 keynote speakers, were focused on artificial intelligence, we realized that was a topic we needed to tackle in more depth in our district, and doing so with the help and support and insight of our students and student voice, and eventually, I suspect, more of our students as we go out and get more information, I think will be invaluable in terms of looking at whether we need to make some changes to policies, update them, create new ones, et cetera, because artificial intelligence is here and it's not going away. And it's something that we need to learn to work with. How we do that is what the conversations will be. Also want to thank, I know we kept thanking them, but it's always a treat to get to hear snippets from Broadway Under the Stars, and they did not disappoint once again. It was amazing. So I hope if you don't have your tickets, everybody gets a chance to go get their tickets. And with that, next on the agenda is awards and recognitions. Dr. Reynolds, or shall we just head on down? We will head on down, and Mr. Droege will MC.
Good evening, President Greenberg, governing board members, members of cabinet, and attendees both in person and virtual. Tonight, we have 3 recognitions to share with you. This evening, we'll be inviting our honorees to the front of the room for the recognition and photo. So when I say your name, please come to the front of the room. Our first honoree tonight was recently named the 2024 Teacher of the Year by the Arizona Technology Council and Arizona Commerce Authority for her remarkable contributions to STEM education, dedication to improving Arizona's innovative ecosystem, and for motivating students to reach their goals. This teacher fosters a love for STEM and helps students reach their full potential in school and future careers. Next month, she'll be recognized at the 2024 Governor's Celebration of Innovation. But tonight, please help me welcome from PVHS Crest Bioscience Sustainability Teacher, Michelle Landreville.
So tonight, and it's bioscience. I don't know why my contract says sustainability. Sustainability was not sustainable. So 11 years ago, I was brought on as the second bioscience teacher, and I'm the OG at Crest now. I have biological family with me. I have child number 3, Gabriel, and his girlfriend Taylor, and my husband Brian, and my Crest fam is here tonight too. So thank you for coming out.
Our next recognition is the recipient of the Paradise Valley Education Association's Recognition of Professional Standards Awards for Teachers. The honoree this evening will be introduced by Ms. Heather Schmidt, PVEA President.
Too tall for this. Good evening, Dr. Reynolds, President Greenberg, Governing Board Cabinet, and everyone in the room. Thank you for being here. My name is Heather Schmidt, and I am the proud president of the Paradise Valley Education Association. Once a month, I get to stand up here and recognize one of our amazing educators for our award, which is Professionals Recognizing Other Professionals' Successes, and is awarded once per month to a deserving member who's been nominated by a colleague. This evening, I am honored to nominate someone that I also call a friend, Tanny Ely, a 6th grade teacher at Eagle Ridge Elementary School, as the October 2024 recipient. Miss Ely was nominated by her colleague, Debbie Adams, who said the following: "I am not a new teacher, but I am new to Eagle Ridge this year, and so are many of our staff. Tanny has gone above and beyond to welcome us all. She meets with teachers before and after school, includes others in her planning, and shares ideas with outstretched arms. Tanny is willing and open to collaboration, but also picks up the pieces when things need to be done. She's always available with a positive affirmation and a smile. Over the summer, she, and along with some others, cleaned out and organized the Eagle Ridge Science Lab and furnished and organized the warmest reading and small group work area in our 2nd floor. Tanny encourages her students with warmth and kindness and clear expectations with consistency. Tanny is a problem solver, a team player, a colleague, and a friend that raises the bar for all of us who work with her. Thank you, Tanny, for making this school year so welcoming to all of us who have found a new home at Eagle Ridge. We are all lucky to have you." Side note, Debbie Adams also brought cookies when we went and did this award. So because she knew the kids would be a little off kilter, so there was room for a special snack that morning. Congratulations, Tanny. Eagle Ridge family, and you're in.
Last tonight, but certainly not least, is the Paradise Valley Education Support Professional of the Month. PVSEA President, Ms. Michelle Courtwright, is here to make the presentation.
President Greenberg, Governing Board, Dr. Reynolds, and Cabinet. This month, we are going to recognize Sean Trossel McCarter, and he can't be here tonight because he is with his mom, but I'm sure he's watching online. He is a custodian over at Whispering Winds Elementary. And if you know anything about our custodians, they are a jack of all trades. I will tell you, they have a bargained 30-minute uninterrupted lunch. I doubt any custodian in this district has ever had it, but no one has ever called me to complain or grieve because they are there no matter what the thing is. If you work at a school and you hear a color code, you know that the custodian is coming. And if it's a rainbow code, I think all of us know where they're going and what they're doing. But Mr. Sean or Mr. T, depending on who you talk to, is a jack of all trades. He also this year co-hosted Wacky Wednesdays. And if you know anything about an elementary school, wacky anything in an unstructured area like the cafeteria makes for an interesting day. So he chose to do this. But it's not just the teachers and the staff that sent letters. I have letters here from parents, and this one struck me. It says, as parents, we get a lot of information from school about school from our children. What many of us parents have learned is that Mr. Sean is one of the first names students learn after their teacher's name. And that's because he greets students and interacts with them around campus every day. When parents come to visit, he greets them. He says hello. We all see him filling in for the crossing guard, holding the stop sign, waving at neighbors and parents. And these are the kind of employees that we need in our district. This is customer service at its best, and that's why people come to our district. So it is with great pleasure that we recognize Sean Trossel McCarter as the ESP of the month. Thank you.
And that, President Greenberg, concludes tonight's awards and recognitions.
Thank you all. Next on the agenda is superintendent comments. Dr. Reynolds.
Thank you, President Greenberg. In PV schools, we engage, inspire, and nurture students through high-quality instruction, meaningful educational opportunities, and dynamic learning experiences. One of those opportunities is our North Valley Arts Academies, housed on 3 of our campuses: Desert Cove Elementary, Shea Middle, and Shadow Mountain High School. This school within a school experience provides opportunities for students in grades K through 12 to fully embrace the creative process and flourish as an artist. Whether it's dance, theater, music, technology, or visual arts, students can find the pathway that fits their passion. With so many opportunities and immersive experiences, NVAA aims to provide a creative outlet for all students with a range of skills and abilities. To learn more about the North Valley Arts Academies, visit our website at pvschools.net. Next, we have the Teaching Excellence Award. Juana Verma, a Crest computer science teacher at Paradise Valley High School, was recently awarded the 2023-24 Computer Science Teaching Excellence Award. Ms. Verma is a computer science teacher who has made quite the impact in the classroom and within the lives of her students. Congratulations, Ms. Verma, on a much-deserved award. And I believe she is here to... Thank you so much for all you do. Next, we have our Rising Educator Award. Congratulations to Pinnacle Junior Soren Spiller for receiving the 2024 Promising Rising Educator Award. This honor was presented by Arizona State University's Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College and recognizes a student's exceptional dedication and commitment to the education process. Soren won over the judges after submitting a strong personal statement and personal reflection on the Next Education Workforce Initiative, which delivers meaningful and equitable learning outcomes for all. PV Schools is proud of Soren's commitment to education. Keep up the amazing work and best of luck on your incredible journey. I believe she is here this evening. Is this one where I offer her a teaching contract right now? Is that what right? Okay. Lastly, I want to give a big thank you to our district supporters. Your generosity helps create many of the amazing experiences available in Paradise. Later in this evening's meeting, the governing board will consider a list of gifts and donations for approval, and you'll see that many of them are from the PV Schools Education Foundation, in total accounting for $32,080 of additional support for students. I would like to thank the Executive Director, Stacy Husher of the PV Schools Education Foundation, for funding a handful of programs in our district that benefit our students, particularly programs and experiences that make dual enrollment, AP exams, STEAM opportunities, and more a reality for our students. So thank you to PV Schools Education Foundation for your incredible generosity. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. Next on the agenda is items for approval. The first item is consideration and approval of service order agreement with Khan Academy and the Arizona Department of Education. And I will turn it over to Ms. Copen.
President Greenberg and Governing Board, PV Schools has the opportunity to partner with the Arizona Department of Education in piloting a new artificial intelligence tutor called Conmigo at no cost to PV Schools. This is an innovative tool and it's designed to support students in grades 5th grade through 12th grade and has the potential to significantly enhance our learning outcomes. To participate, ADE has asked PV Schools to sign a service order agreement and Khan Academy district terms of service. This partnership aligns with our district's commitment to providing innovative educational opportunities for our students. And by participating the Conmigo pilot, we can explore the potential of AI to enhance teaching and learning in our classrooms.
Thank you, Ms. Copen. We don't have any comment cards. May I please have a motion to approve the service order agreement with Khan Academy and the Arizona Department of Education as presented? Ms. Baker.
So moved.
Are there any board members wishing to make a comment, ask any questions? Mrs. Case?
So this is the AI portion of the Khan Academy that I know about. I mean, okay, just checking, because the Khan Academy that my children have used has been really wonderful. And so are they saying that normally this costs money? Because Khan Academy children have had access to before. So we're doing this as a trial for the state? Tell us more how that works.
Yes, President Greenberg, Mrs. Case. Yes, we were actually looking at this as a potential pilot. We were going to purchase it, but ADE partnered with Khan Academy. This is their new AI, Conmigo, which is an AI tutor assistant for students, but it can also be a teacher's assistant. And they are branching into the AI realm of education. And we are eager to partner now that ADE is involved and we want to, and they're paying for it as a bonus. We want to see how this works in a classroom. This is really innovative and different kind of AI. So Mr. Pantera gave us an example of ChatGPT. This is very different. This is where students can ask it questions. It's not going to give them the answer. It's actually going to guide them to getting the answer on their own. So it's programmed differently than what we would normally see like in ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that.
So it said it's like a tutoring service. Is that?
Exactly. like you would
Wow.
have a tutor right by you. Yes.
Wow, that's really, and where are we going to be using it then?
So we secured a little over 2,400 licenses from ADE because many districts applied to get these. And so we were able to secure that many. I am working with IT to figure out how we're going to offer this to teachers. There is some training that goes with it. So teachers that would volunteer to be part of this pilot would have to agree to some training. And then we'll have some follow-up. We're really interested in how they set up structures around this so kids can effectively work with it. That's what we're really looking at in the
And
pilot.
when would it be utilized by our students?
Like when it would start.
Yeah.
So approval tonight, and then we can start basically advertising it to our teachers and seeing who's interested.
So, but it's ready to go whenever we're ready for it.
I believe so. Yes, Mr. Billings is working with that.
Wow, it's way beyond my imagination. Thank you.
Mrs. Christensen?
Very excited about this. Several of us attended a conference, an ASBA law conference, and most of the cabinet was there as well. And so I'm very excited about this because we did commit to using AI, but this is good AI with guardrails. It's not anything goes. And so I'm really excited that we are partnering with ADE and that we are moving forward with things like this. So were there any concerns with rollout from a technology standpoint? Have there been any concerns, or are we just waiting for approval tonight and then moving forward?
Ms. Christian, we don't anticipate any. In fact, in the service order agreement, that's one thing we're looking for to see if if Khan Academy's safe guardrails around AI match our guidelines in PV, and they mesh perfectly.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any? Mrs. Case?
Maybe they have training in AI for the teachers to use it to teach the kids.
Ms. Case, yes, that is, they'll have some online training. It might include an AI instructor, I'm not sure.
Does anybody else have any comments, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Copeman. Next on the agenda is approval of the annual financial report for fiscal year 2023-24, and I will turn it over to Mrs. Bergen.
President Greenberg, I'll just jump in quickly on
Okay.
behalf of Ms. Berrigan. We are bringing you the annual financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th in 2025 this evening. I just want to let you know Ms. Berrigan has been a little under the weather. She's feeling much better, but her voice hasn't quite gotten there. So I may jump in.
You may jump in. I'm going to give it a go.
She'll be awesome.
Some kind person named Deanne gave me some mints, so that's helping. Okay, our annual financial report is a very important time of year for us. And before I get into that, I just want to remind everybody of our financial reporting timeline, and that very often we're working on 3 years at a time. And these aren't all of the due dates within here, but it just sort of gives an example. Each different color represents a different year. And we see that at various times we're working on all 3 of those. Particularly right now, we're finishing out last fiscal year 24, already working and planning on next fiscal year, while obviously still being in the current fiscal year. So we manage a few different years at a time, and the team does a great job with that, and I really appreciate the work that they put in. The purpose for our annual financial report is, first of all, it's a required due date of October 15th from statute to report out, and it provides our policymakers, our taxpayers, our community members, our detailed financial information of our revenues and expenditures. The state does review our AFR to make sure we don't exceed any of our budget limits. On occasion, school districts do that. We don't. We never will. This information is used to create that annual comprehensive financial report that comes out in the January-February timeframe. That's about 150 pages. Much of that data comes from this report. This is required to be approved by the governing board. And then importantly, for our financial transparency piece, we post the AFR on the Arizona Department of Education's website with a link to that on our website, along with all of our other financial information, our budgets for the year and prior years. Just a few quick facts for fiscal year '24. Our average daily membership which is essentially our student enrollment, was about 25,780. And they have us at ADA actually go to the fourth decimal there. So the base support level last year was $4,914. And those are the two main multipliers that give us something called our revenue control limit. That's essentially our main component of our M&O budget. That's how we get the largest amount of our budget from the state. We had almost 37,000 lines of accounting data and over 11,000 purchase orders. So that just kind of gives you just a very few small pieces to the scope of the work that's done financially throughout the district. For our M&O budget, our budgeted expenditures, we were able to spend up to $271.8 thousand. Our actual expenditures were about million. Our actual expenditures were about $254.5 million, leaving our budget balance at a little over $17 million. And that's the area that we strive for when we talk about this in bargaining and with the governing board each year, that 6 to 7% range. And that bullet at the bottom is just a reminder that there's a fund balance page in the AFR now that's a little bit confusing for many, many people because they don't understand the difference between cash and actual budget in the state of Arizona. And some funds are budget controlled and some funds are cash controlled. M&O is a budget controlled fund and it doesn't actually matter how much cash we have in that fund. So that fund balance page can be a little bit misleading. We've talked about this a little bit when we dealt with the Quasmeyer lawsuit and having the cash on hand to be able to pay for that because it didn't affect our budget capacity. For our 23-24 revenues, the largest portion was from our local revenues at 56%, followed by state at 34%, federal at 10%, and county at 0 with an actual negative number. And that's because that county equalization is slowly going away. And this past year actually was a negative number for those who were adjusting some previous collections. Next year, that will probably be down to 0. It's a potential to have another small negative amount. In the local revenues, 29.8 million of that is the M&O override, 6.4 is the district additional assistance override, and 56.5 is the bond revenue. And then most of the remainder of that local portion is the equalization base formula. That equalization base formula comes from that RCL number that we talked about on the prior slide, our main equalization formula to fund all of our students. In our district, we cover about 69% of that equalization base. We're a higher property wealth district, and so we'll cover a larger portion of the equalization base formula than the state does for us. For our fiscal year '24 expenditures, as mentioned, our maintenance and operation were at $254.5 million, debt service at $59 million, that's the paying off of the bonds. Our bond building, so what we expended in bond projects was $36.6 million. We had federal and state grants at 27.7, much of that federal grant being ESSER 3, the final ESSER. So that number will go down significantly next year. Excuse me. And then classroom site fund at 22.7 million. Our expenditures by our basic operating, or for our basic operating funds by object code, salaries and benefits, salaries at 61%, benefits at 23% for a total of 84%. For most districts, we fall in that 84 to 86% range for our operating funds. And indeed, this year we fell in that same slot again. Last year we were at 85%, and this year purchase services has taken on another percent. We are seeing a trend, particularly with special education services and outsourcing student needs, along with transportation for special education increasing pretty significantly. And so it doesn't surprise us to see that that purchase services piece went up by 1%. Salaries and benefits going down by 1%. And before I answer any questions on that, I want to say a few more very important words, and that is a thank you to the people that help put all of this together, namely Kathy DeStefano. She's our internal auditor. She does the bulk of the work for the AFR. Connor Hutchinson, our new director of finance, and Vanessa Shapiro, our prior director of finance, who's at another district and still helping out as we're training Connor. They deal with a lot of questions from me. They deal with a lot of, oh, one more thing. And I just appreciate all of their hard work. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Berrigan. Informative as usual. Does any board member have any questions or comments for
Thank you.
Ms. Berrigan or Dr. Reynolds in absentia? Anybody? Mrs. Christensen? Oh, wait, before I do that, we need to make a motion. So, Mrs. Baker, before we do that, may I please have a motion to approve the annual financial report for fiscal year 2023-24 per Arizona Revised Statute 15904 as submitted?
So moved.
Thank you. Now, Mrs. Christensen.
Thank you, Mrs. Berrigan, for putting this detailed report together, and as well as your team. Just have a question about with ESSER expiring and decreased enrollment, what sort of things are we doing to mitigate risks so that we can continue to find ways to pay our teachers more and to maintain business as usual? What sort of mitigation plans do we have in place or have we been discussing?
So with ESSER, as we've discussed over the years, we knew that that money was going away. And so there was a continuous conversation and an understanding with our school site administrators where most of the ESSER money was being spent, that this is, if this is going into personnel, this is going away in fiscal year 23-24. And so they all knew that. And, you know, Dr. Holmes would talk last year in particular about the fact that we were able to find places for any of those staff members that wanted to stay. They may not have been precisely the same positions or at exactly the same school, but we had enough turnover to be able to have a spot for them. In terms of declining enrollment, each year as I present the budget, we talk about what that looks like from a financial perspective, along with any other negatives and positives of the budget that we talk about each year, increased cost to utilities, increased cost to supplies, any changes to our TEI, that whole list of things that we talk about. And we plan for those declines accordingly. The biggest chunk of the decline is generally taken from the reduction to teacher FTE. When you have fewer students, you generally need fewer teachers. Unfortunately, they don't always land where we need them to land, but he gives it a pretty good guess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions, comments? Mrs. Case?
As always, our expenditures are salary and the benefits for those employees. And it's always interesting to see that's what we do in this district. And we try to put all our funds there that we can. And that's why it's so important to have bonds so that all of that money in M&O that we can go to teachers and classrooms and not fixing the air conditioner, which we have to have. So anyway, it's always amazing when I see this pie chart, which I love pie charts, how much money goes to benefits and salaries. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. I guess it's more of could we have a deeper explanation? When we look at the revenue side and we see that, 56% is local, 34% is state, et cetera. And what did you say it was about 69% is the equalization base? Can you delve into that a little bit more? Because we're always hearing, it's contingent on state funding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
So why is our local portion so large, and in terms of other districts, where do we fall in terms of we're 69? Where is anybody 100? Is anybody 0? Is any that type of thing?
Yes.
Can you go into that a little?
Yeah. So the equalization-based formula, just as a reminder, is the bulk of it is the RCL, revenue control limit. Number of students we have enrolled times the base amount that we get per pupil from the legislature. And there's a base amount for M&O that I talked about. There's also a base amount for the district additional assistance for each student. And so that total becomes our equalization base. That's how the state has said we will fund every student equally. But on the tax side, on the collection side of things, there is a state general fund that covers some portion of that. And there's another calculation that takes into consideration each district's local wealth, essentially, the property wealth within the districts. And we are a higher property wealth district. Our property wealth is approaching 5 billion. And so that's why our local portion is 69%. There are some districts, I believe Scottsdale, they cover all of their equalization base because their property value is so high. They do a split formula for K-8 and high schools, and I know that there have been years where their K-8 is covered completely by local and high school is covered somewhat by state, but I think it's complete for them now. The district where the Palo Verde plant is, and the name of the district's escaping me, Saddle Mountain, there we go. They are completely covered by their local tax because they have the power plant there. The local tax covers all of that and nothing comes from the state general fund. There are, anything in between there. There's about 225 districts in the state. My prior district, the split was almost exactly the opposite. The state covered about 70% and the local taxpayers covered about 30%. Does that answer your question? Good.
Yeah, I just think it's better to go into a little,
Yeah.
I think it's informative to have a little bit more there. Anybody, Mrs. Case?
In regards to what you just asked about, it could still be confusing, and I've just heard this so many years that I've finally gotten after so many years. Everybody gets the same amount. It just depends on which pot it comes from. Is that correct?
Correct. If you took the same student and put them in the Scottsdale district that is completely covered by local, and let's say in our district, that student we receive about $6,000 in revenue for that student because they may have some weights associated with them. Scottsdale would also say, okay, we get $6,000 per student. Our $6,000 per student would be covered 69% by our local taxpayers, 31% by the state. In Scottsdale, that entire $6,000 would be covered by the local taxpayers.
But it's all the same amount is my point.
The same amount per student. Yep.
Okay.
If it's the same student.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the AFR, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Mrs. Berrigan, and hope you feel better. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right, you do. Okay, well, Dr. Reynolds can pinch hit if necessary. Next on the agenda is acceptance of gifts and donations, and we have many I would like to acknowledge. Dr. Reynolds already gave sort of a lump sum from the PV Schools Education Foundation, but I will break that down with some other donations we received. The Education Foundation gave $1,500 to Campobello Elementary for field trips, PBIS, and STEAM programs. Dorito Partners gave a total of $2,000 to Echo Mountain Intermediate for their Caught Being Kind store. The Education Foundation gave Echo Mountain Primary just slightly under $1,500 for field trips, PBIS, and STEAM programs. At Larkspur, the Charities Aid Foundation America, also known as Cyber Grants LLC, gave the school $1,000 for the site discretionary fund. At North Canyon High School, the PV Schools Education Foundation gave just over $9,100 for dual enrollment, AP exam, and IB fees to assist students with financial need. The foundation gave $10,000 to Paradise Valley High School for the same programs. And PV High School also received $1,000 from David Ardsma for the boys golf program. At Shadow Mountain High School, the PV Schools Education Foundation gave just over $9,700, again, for dual enrollment, AP, and IB fees. At Sonoran Sky Elementary School, the Sonoran Sky PTO gave $3,780 for a front entry beautification project, but also gave just over $95,770 for the basketball court sunshade. At Sunrise Middle School, Michael Mikulski and Rachel Mikulski gave just over $1,000 for the robotics program. And at Wildfire Elementary, the Peter R. Marsh Foundation gave $1,350 for the music program. So thank you very much to all of the donors. If any of you are here, please accept our thanks in person. And if you know anybody that gave, please convey our thanks. And Mrs. Baker, may I have a motion for acceptance of gifts and donations, please?
So moved.
Does any board member have any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you again to all of our generous donors. Next on the agenda is call to the public, so please turn your attention to the video monitors.
Call to the Public is about to convene. This portion of today's meeting allows the public the opportunity to address the governing board. Although state law does not require that the governing board hold a call to the public, the Paradise Valley Unified School District and its board have chosen to do so because we believe it's important to hear about concerns and issues from our community. While Call to the Public is not designed to be a discussion, the board is here to listen. Due to Arizona open meeting law, the governing board cannot respond to, discuss, or take any action on items brought up during this time. However, staff members may be directed to get back to you and address individual concerns. As a reminder, the point of this and every board meeting is to accomplish the business at hand, and to be able to do so in an open and collaborative way. All in attendance are expected to observe meeting rules, as well as rules of politeness and decorum, so that we may serve as an example to our students that issues can be discussed in a respectful and civil manner.
Thank you. Tonight we have one person who has submitted a comment card prior to the start of the meeting, and so our speaker will have 3 minutes for remarks. As a reminder, we ask that you please direct your comments to the board, and even though I'm going to say your name when you come to the podium, will you please also say your name? Our one speaker tonight is Amanda Lim.
President Greenberg, governing board members, Dr. Reynolds, and cabinet. My name is Amanda Lim, and I just wanted to take a moment to highlight some resilience at Whispering Winds Academy. Our Mandarin immersion program was affected by one of the things that many schools have been affected by: teacher retention. Our Mandarin program has experienced great stability, and our teachers have been around for quite some time. But sadly, this summer, 2 of our teachers departed, and so we had open spots in our Mandarin immersion program. These teachers take more time than usual to hire because of the certifications, and often they might be coming from an international setting. We were luckily able to fill one of those roles, and that teacher proved to be very resilient as she arrived just days before the school year started from China. She settled in, worked with our staff and teachers to get a stable environment and hit the ground running, and has proved to be an amazing community member already at our school, jumping in to be the parent liaison, or the teacher liaison between the Mandarin immersion program and the staff members of the immersion program. But the resilience doesn't end there at Whispering Winds. We had one spot that was still open. So Dr. Ruth J., who had just completed her PhD and our world language teacher at Whispering Winds Academy, jumped in to fill the 5-6 role while we waited to hire a teacher into that spot. She proved to help get our 5-6 kiddos to stay on track with their immersion program. And our immersion program is made up of about 1/3 of our students at our school, and most of our families there are open enrollment. So to have that program be maintained and have our staff and teachers continue to support that program has been an amazing thing. We are happy to say that that teacher role has been filled. That teacher just started on Monday, and it was our first full day teaching today. So we're happy to say our Mandarin immersion program has sustained at Whispering Winds and made it through this rough storm. Though we can't promise the weather is going to get any better, we can say that our Whispering Winds Academy is staying resilient through this, and our parents are really appreciative to have our Mandarin immersion program maintain and continue at Whispering Winds. Thank you for your time, and have a good night.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is items for discussion, and I will turn it over to Mrs. Bergen if her throat can last, to present an update of bond and budget override programs and capital improvement programs.
Okay, this one's a little longer. We'll see how it goes. I need the presentation on the full screen, sorry. Thank you. So this is another statutory requirement for us to present out to the board and the public on our bonds and our overrides. But more importantly, it's really to inform our community how those funds have been used as they are voter-approved initiatives. So just as a reminder, we do have an approved 15%, which is the maximum for a maintenance and operation override. As you saw from the previous presentation, that's a little under $30 million for us. 6.4 million we get for annual district additional assistance override. That was formerly known as the capital outlay override if you've been in school districts for more than a few years. And then we also have bonds approved by the excuse me, community. In this presentation, I'll only be presenting on the 2019 bonds that were approved for the 236 million, because in fiscal year 24, we hadn't spent any of the approved in November 2023 bonds throughout that last year. So some more details on the maintenance and operation override that was last passed by our voters in November of 2022 for that 15% of the revenue control limit, a little under $30 million for the fiscal 24 year. That override is good in full for 5 years, which would be through fiscal year 27-28. It then phases down by a third for 2 years until it goes to zero if it's not renewed. Early renewal would be in November of 2026, which would potentially align with a DAA override renewal also for November of 2026. And I'll talk about that DAA override in a moment too. Just as a reminder, the purpose and the efforts for the M&O override that are supported by those funds from the actual voter pamphlet are listed here. I won't read all of them, but these are the things that the override goes towards supporting. Our budget matches our expenditures. We spend every penny of that M&O override each year, and just like with the rest of M&O, most of that is for salaries and benefits for staff. Excuse me, with the district additional assistance override that was last passed by our voters in November of 2019 for $6.4 million annually. That override's done a little bit differently. It's done as a flat dollar amount versus a percentage. That one is good in full for 7 years. There's no phase down on a DAA override, which means that would be good through the fiscal 27 year. And we would need to go out to the ballot no later than November of 2026 for a continuation. An early renewal would be a November 2025 election. And just as a reminder, when I say early renewal, that's going out really 2 years early to give the district a chance, the potential to pass it a second time if it doesn't pass in that first year. That's historically been what the district has done, although we did not do that for the last M&O override. The plan for the district additional assistance override each year is to spend $5.96 million on instructional materials and then $450,000 on support vehicles. Those are our white fleet vehicles, mainly our maintenance vehicles and activity vehicles that can't be purchased with bond funds. We can use bond funds for school buses though. So that totals to $6.4 million annually over 7 years. That's almost $45 million for the district for the instructional materials and support vehicles. While those are the budgets each year, sometimes there is carry forward in these funds, and sometimes that's intentional because we know we have larger curriculum adoptions. And in fiscal year 24, we had the Wit and Wisdom. Is that right, Jean? Thank you. The Wit and Wisdom curriculum adoption and a couple of other ones. And so in that year, we knew that we needed to carry forward funds from the 22-23 school year to help pay for some of those additional instructional materials that were needed at about $10.5 million. And then we spent $324,000 on support vehicles. For our bond, that was passed by our voters in November of 2019 for a little over $236 million. All bonds have to be sold within 10 years of when the voters approved them, and all of our 2019 authorization has been sold at this point. We've generally maintained a 4-year bond cycle in the district. We have a few more years to determine whether that needs to continue or whether we can spread that out a little bit more. It's a little bit of a balancing act. We did pass the large bond of $340 million last November, but along with that, that ask came with the knowledge that there is significant increases in construction costs, particularly since COVID. We used to plan for 4 to 5% increases in projects each year. That has changed to 8 to 10%, and that industry sees that that's going to be the trend moving forward. They don't foresee us going back to that 4 to 5%. With the bond authorization, this was listed in the voter pamphlet, and I say that, but just as a reminder, the voter pamphlet goes out to every registered voter in the district, and it's fairly significant, 20 to 30 pages, depending on the number of pro and con statements for each initiative, and lists out all of the details of what we use the bond for. And this is what we listed as our uses for bonds for non-administrative and administrative. In fiscal year 23-24, these are the areas we spent in. Most of that obviously going to our facilities, building and grounds, as that's where we have the largest budget, but also some for technology, and then furniture and equipment for non-administrative. And then there were a few expenditures in administrative for facilities, buildings and grounds, a lot for technology there, furniture and equipment, and then some bond sale costs, totaling a little over $38 million. Just as a reminder of our bond authorization summary, the authorization was for the $236,140,000. Fiscal year 24 expenditures were $38.3 million, and our prior year's expenditures were $113.4 million. That leaves $84 million. Now, in the meantime, that was just as the end of June 30th. In the meantime, Dr. Drew Davis, Mr. Jeff Billings, Mr. Brandon George, they've been spending down more of that $84 million. So some of that's already gone. You know how men are, big spenders. Oh, he's here. Sorry. I thought he left. They're doing their job. That's what they're meant to do, is to spend those funds down. So the point in saying that is that in the next board meeting, we will bring before you our next bond sale, which will be the first bond sale for the bonds that were approved by voters in November of 2023. If I remember correctly, we're doing $75 million, but it'll be on the next board agenda because they're ready to start spending some more money next summer. In addition to reporting on our voter initiatives, we also take this time to report on some school facilities divisions funding. There are two funding sources. I'm almost done. I'm going to get through this. Two funding sources, building renewal grants. This used to be a non-grant, a non-competitive grant program, and districts would receive an amount regardless of what they applied for. But in the last 10 to 12 years, it's become a competitive grant process. And there is not nearly enough money for all of the asks. And some school districts don't even ask because they know that it's not likely that they'll get the money. But Dr. Davis and his team work to try to get some of those funds each year. And for fiscal year 23-24, we were able to get $778,000. And we did obviously use all of that for the approved projects. We do have some money left over from new school facilities from our last new school. Mostly that just keeps being interest that we earn on that. And we will leave that in there until we have another new school facility, and then we can use those funds for that. Did I skip one? No, I did not. Okay. This is another pie chart for those who like pie charts. The largest portion of our capital expenditures were on bond renovations at 61%, followed by district additional assistance at 24%. Other bond projects, that's the technology pieces and transportation pieces, are school buses at 13%, and then our school facilities division dollars, just a meager 2%, but we'll take every penny we can from them. And just a couple of PV school statistics. We have 49 sites, 258 buildings, over 835 acres of land, and almost 5.3 million square feet of interior space that our incredible team takes care of. I appreciate all of the work that they do. I appreciate the work that Dr. Davis, our construction manager, John Glennie, who's new this year, and the work that he's doing to make sure that our schools stay in top-notch condition. It is a reason that parents pick our schools and stay in our schools. We do keep our schools in good condition. With that, I also just want to thank again our Paradise Valley Unified School District voters and supporters for passing those bonds and those overrides. We try to use every penny as wisely as possible, and we always seek our community input for that. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Berrigan. Does anybody have any questions or Mrs. Case?
Thank you. Back on the chart that says non-administrative and administrative, I don't see page numbers on here. It
Put it back on the
has
screen, please.
2019. With the slide 12, is that what you said? Okay. What is the difference between non-administrative and administrative? I don't understand.
Non-administrative is basically our school sites. So if there are students on the site, that cost goes to non-administrative. That's where the bulk of our buildings are, and that's where the bulk of the funds are associated with. We do have some administrative facilities, so obviously the building we're in is an administrative facility. We have our 2 buildings up north the one that includes transportation, our facilities department and food and nutrition department, and then the one we refer to as TALK, which is our technology building. It's a little bit further over. Additionally, if there are sites that are no longer schools, like where our community ed programs potentially are, we can't use any bond funds for any people who are renting outside of us. You can't use bond funds for those buildings. But if we repurpose a school for different purposes, like community ed will be moving to a school, that would also be considered administrative. We can't use non-administrative funds for that because they are not a K-12 school. They're just our preschoolers.
Okay, so non-administrative means there's students at that facility.
Correct.
And it doesn't matter if it's a preschool or if it's high school or whatever. If there is a student there, then it's considered non-administrative.
Correct.
Okay. And then the technology number is the biggest number under there.
For administration this year.
And that's because like where we have all our technology building, that's really expensive.
Yeah.
To buy new computer things or new.
A lot of that is infrastructure related and things that are network related that make all of the systems at the school sites work. But because they're housed there or part of the infrastructure, they have to go under administrative for bond.
Okay, and so like the bus facility
Mhm.
also has the nutrition there.
Correct.
That's in the administrative
Correct.
part of all this.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Does anybody else have any questions or Mrs. Christensen?
Okay, I think I was taking notes and you said something that I missed. You said next month we are going to be looking at renewal or a new M&O or bond. I missed it because I was taking notes on something.
That's okay. Next month, the board will have in front of them our next bond sale.
Bond
So
sale,
in
okay.
November of 2023, the community approved the $340 million bond. We haven't sold any of those bonds yet. So it will be the first bond sale. I think the amount's $75 million.
Okay, perfect. I thought we were going to ask for more because we haven't even touched the 300. Okay, I'm glad I heard you wrong.
Yes.
It's a bond sale.
Bond sale,
we're
not a bond
asking- Okay,
authorization. Mhm.
okay. Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Mr. Pantera?
I have a question. I think I know the answer, but the new school money that can't spend because we're not building new schools,
Mhm.
that wouldn't go like if you renamed a building and repurposed it for another group of students for some other reason. That couldn't be used for that, could it?
I don't know for sure, but I highly doubt it.
Be nice though, wouldn't
It
it?
would be nice.
All right, thank you.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Seeing none, thank you again, Mrs.
Thank you.
Berrigan. Hopefully you can rest your throat. Next on the agenda is discussion and consideration. We're not going to vote on this, but consideration and direction on voting on the bylaw change proposal from the Arizona School Boards Association. I think everybody's got everything at your desk. We had originally thought we'd put this on the approval agenda, but it's kind of extensive, so it felt like maybe talking about it a little bit first and just sort of seeing where people felt before we actually put it on the agenda for approval. We're fine time-wise. ASBA doesn't need it back until, I don't know, early December, so prior to the annual meeting. So we're in good shape. I will be honest with you, I don't have any dramatic insights into it any more than I think all of you do if you read through the material. But in general, it looks to me like the governance committee really sat down and looked at the bylaws extensively for ASBA. And I would say that based on, number of pieces that have happened in terms of questions that have arisen over the past year or two, who does what, that, et cetera. They really delved into did a deep dive, and they looked at several things. And so part of what we have is a summary sheet. If you looked at that, that goes into, what they changed in various articles. They did not change everything, but they have looked at this and done quite a bit. They've put in some language about who may or may not hold offices within the organization. That's different than it was. They've put in language about suspensions and expulsions. They've added a piece that if a member of their board or executive committee, actually an officer, director, or executive committee member must resign from the board if they declare candidacy for a paid partisan elected office. They have revised some of the duties of their officers, and they have done a deeper dive into meetings of their officers. They've also talked a little bit more about standing committees. Just based on what they've got here, it looks like they didn't define all of them as much as they could have previously. And then, some of this, like I said, is they have kept what they had. So I just thought it would make sense to maybe talk about it. I have dealt with bylaws from different organizations, so I personally kind of looked at this, and there's some things here I can understand where they're coming from. There's some things I don't know that I necessarily agree with, but I'd like to, since this is something we will be voting on, I thought it might be good to throw it open. Mr. Pantera?
Yes, there's actually a webinar that I'm going to be participating on this to get more in-depth ideas about what they did. I like that there's some information there about the vetting of people that are going to be directors, and et cetera, more deeply than maybe it has in the past. It's very nuts and bolts, and I think they're trying to make things more precise. And it talks also about what it takes to bring something like an emergency thing, to bring something to the board of directors, which I don't think really was quite there before. Not in a more, it's more fluid now, I think, more easy to do that. But again, let's look at it. I think it's, I haven't seen any red flags for myself, and I'll know more after the webinar.
Yeah, I think that webinar is open to pretty much, if anybody else wants to. I think it's next week.
Well, I didn't check into that. I just
No,
know I'm going
I'm
to.
not saying you're the only one. I'm just saying that I think I know we've all gotten some stuff, so I would recommend that, if anybody wants to join Mr. Pantera in that webinar, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's going to be for everybody in the state. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any other? Mrs. Christensen?
I was just wondering if you, President Greenberg, if you can provide your insights, since you have looked at it in detail. I've looked at it, but I don't really have a point of reference to compare it, and perhaps you can provide some insight on what some of your recommendations or questions would be.
Sure. And I may try and join you just to see if they talk about this a little bit more. I mean, I don't know that I don't want to call it a concern, but just one thing that sort of jumped at me is it seems that they're giving the board more authority or control over certain things. So for example, there's a piece here in Article 4, Section 5 about suspensions and expulsions. And they're basically saying the board of directors can remove any member district or organization for actions of the member district or organization contrary to ASBA's bylaws or conduct deemed detrimental to the association after an appropriate hearing and due process. And while I appreciate they've talked about a hearing and due process, I would hope that if this goes through, there is some sort of policy/procedure that discusses what deemed detrimental. You know, they define it so that districts have a sense of what that is. So, you know, personally, I think it would be great to see that before asking members to do that. You know, another one, when we talk about the selection of the executive director, the contract shall be reviewed and ratified by the entire board, which is great, only after a thorough vetting process determined by the ASBA Board of Directors has been completed. Again, it would be great to know what that vetting process looks like, because when you put it in bylaws like this, it means this, you know, the current board of directors could say this is the process, the next board of directors could change that entirely. And so when it's, you know, it's kind of like that, I think it's a little more vague than is helpful when it's in bylaws. Same thing that there's language in here that the board can remove an officer or director for conduct deemed detrimental. But again, what does detrimental mean? A couple others, and these, again, you know, they may have very good explanations for them. They may absolutely have the policies and procedures, in place. They define their budget and finance oversight committee to say that it shall be established as a standing committee and shall have powers as deemed necessary to ensure the financial health of the association, which again, I think the language, you know, is meant to be, you know, it says financial oversight, but who deems what powers are necessary? And again, how do they define that? So I think in trying to define what they're doing here, I think they need to be more precise. And then strangely, what they didn't change was the fact that this still needs a 2/3 vote of member boards to be adopted. And as we've seen in the past, that's a difficult number to achieve for ASBA because it's 2/3 of all of the member boards, not 2/3 of the boards voting. And they've tried to change this in the past. I don't know if they just are taking a breather on it, but my feeling is if you're going to try and change everything, you should change that as well, because it's an almost impossible number to achieve. There's over, you know, if there's 200 member boards and you need a 2/3 vote, so you're, you know, talking what, 132, 133. If you have 135 boards voting, that's great, but that means 133 of them have to vote the same way or have to vote yes. So again, I don't know why they didn't change that, you know, try and amend that yet again. So those are just some thoughts. Again, I appreciate what they did, and I know they took a lot of time on this. It just feels like for bylaws, it would be more helpful to have more precise language in their bylaws.
That's what I liked about this, because before they never mentioned vetting. It was never in there.
Right.
Yes, we'd like to know what the vetting is, but they never even had it before.
Right.
And maybe they didn't do the 2/3 because you needed 2/3 to change the 2/3 to less than 2/3. I don't know. That's an interesting question, that one.
The electronic voting was changed a few years ago when they went to electronic voting. And then they discovered that it was a very difficult, you know, bar to hit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been almost impossible to change that because they don't get 2/3 of the members voting in one direction. So, Mrs. Baker?
So these are the entire bylaws? Like, this is
I
all of
believe
them?
so.
Is there a way for us to be able to see what like policies and procedures like you were talking about are attached to them? Because I agree that this does seem very vague and it is giving a lot of power to the board of directors. So I'm just curious if there's a way for us to get more information on that.
I mean, I can certainly, contact like the secretary of ASBA, because I suspect she would have any of that if it's to be had. So I can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
Does anybody else have any thoughts or comments or?
Just a
Mrs.
question.
Christensen.
How is this a process that is rare? Do they often update these? I'm just not familiar with ASBA and their bylaws and updating them. Is this something that they do on a frequent, or is this because of some of the occurrences that have occurred in the past year with things that they're trying to mitigate?
I can't answer that except for what I suspect. You know what? Yeah, they have a governance committees, and the charge of the governance committee is to look at bylaws, and so certainly things have come before the body. I would say in all my time on the board, I don't believe I've seen anything this extensive come before. And the concern I have is that if we were doing it in person, I suspect there would be a way to amend on the floor, et cetera, et cetera. But by doing it electronically, I think this is an all or nothing. So they probably should have put that in the bylaw changes as well. But I will see if they do have a policy and procedure manual. I'll work with Mrs. Chisholm on that. Like I'll talk to a couple of people and see if she can talk to a couple of people and see what we can find.
thank you. I just don't feel like I have enough information to like approve these based on just this little, so it's hard to make a decision.
Right. So,
And knowing that we can't change it makes it even harder.
right. Which is why I'm glad Mr. Pantera signed up for the webinar. I would recommend anybody who has time to do that as well. And if we can get that policy procedure manual, just get some more background. If we need to talk about it again, we've got time because, again, our vote is not due until December, so we should be in good shape.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So anybody else have anything?
I just one
Mrs.
last thing. I just want to say thank you because I read through it a couple times and I didn't have a point of reference. So your insight was very helpful, and I think this will help us go back and be able to have some more discernment, especially maybe after the webinar. That will help as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Nobody else has anything else before we adjourn. I'd just like to remind you that our next regular board meeting will be Thursday, November 7th at 6:30 p.m. So Mrs. Baker, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you for being here.